You may be seated. This morning I want to share with you a little bit from the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is the fifth book in the Scriptures, and it's part of what is called the Pentateuch. Pentateuch meaning the five. And there's reasons why I think it's one of the most important. And that is because when the people wanted a king, the prophet said to them, and you've heard me say this before, you will know that you have a good king when the king will write out with his own handwriting the book of Deuteronomy. When the king will carry that with him at all times and read it to the point that they know it by heart. You will know you have a good king when he does that, and when the king will not collect gold, will not collect silver, will not collect horses, and will not collect wives. The kings who spent their time with all that collection never put the people first. That's why that book is so important. And you'll recall there is only one king who knew the book of Deuteronomy by heart and never collected gold, silver, horses, and wives. And that's Jesus. The theme that runs through the Scriptures and is highlighted in this book, two of them. The first one is, God has spoken. Now that's radical stuff. God has spoken to Abraham and said to Abraham, I am going to take your children and your children's children, your seed, and to make you a holy people. Now, holy is I call it a churchy term. People outside of church don't talk about holy. But it's not a churchy term. Any of you bake bread? Anybody bake bread anymore? For those of you who bake bread, or what about maybe some of the men do woodworking? Anybody do woodworking? A couple people? If you're making bread, for example, and you have you're making all this dough and you're going to make something, and you decided you're going to take part of it and make something else with it, so you cut a chunk off and you lay it aside, that you're going to treat it differently. That chunk that you cut off is the holy piece. Maybe you're making bread and you're going to put cinnamon in it, but with this chunk you're going to add raisins or leave off something. Or if you're cutting wood and you have a big chunk of mahogany and you say to yourself, this is really going to make a nice bookcase. I'm going to make a bookcase out of that, but you know what? That wood is so good. I'm going to cut a chunk off, and I'm going to make something different with that. The part that got cut off is the holy piece. It's not that it's better or worse. It's just that it's going to be handled differently. That's what holy means. It's not churchy. It just means that it's going to be treated separately. The other accent is not only that God has spoken, but that we as a people need to remember. And Moses gathers the people together, and he said, remember, we were slaves, and don't ever forget what that felt like. Remember, Pharaoh threw us out of Egypt. He didn't let us go. He threw us out. And in the process, the people of Egypt gave you their diamond rings and their gold necklaces and their Apple watches, etc., etc., etc. Remember that. Remember that when we were running away and faced the sea, we thought it was the cul-de-sac to life. And we were going to have to turn around and go back. But the sea opened up and we passed through. Remember that. Remember that we saw the water come out of the rock when we were thirsty and needed water. Remember, we were hungry and we witnessed the manna fallen from heaven for us to eat. Remember, when we spent 40 years walking through the desert, our clothes never wore out. Remember, in all of that walking, none of us had feet that swelled. Remember that. Why should we remember that? Because your children didn't see it, you did. And your children will think you are crazy. What we have witnessed has never been seen before. No one will believe us. So you must tell your children and your children's children. If you do not, they will never know. If you do not, they will come to you and say, Grandma, whatever floats your boat. They will say, Grandpa, if it makes you feel better, believe in that. Listen to what Moses actually says.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're away on a journey, when you're lying down, and when you're getting up again. Tie them to your hands as a reminder, and wear them on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and your gates. The Lord your God will soon bring you into the land he swore to give to your ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is a land filled with large, prosperous cities that you did not build. The houses will be richly stocked with goods you did not produce. You will draw water from cisterns you did not dig, and you will eat from vineyards and olive trees you did not plant. When you've eaten your fill in the land, be careful not to forget the Lord who rescued you from slavery in the land of Egypt.
If we do not understand the past, we will hit the cul-de-sacs of life and not reach the blessings of the future. None of us were there in Egypt. But each of us has faced those difficulties in life. Many of you have had job difficulties. Many of you have had health issues. Many have had trouble with their children, grandchildren, parents. Many things in life have that dead-end feeling. I think I made the mistake when I was younger not to share some things with my children. Now there's the need to protect the children. But that's not protection. Protection is to share your story. Why should you share your story of your difficulties with your children and your grandchildren? Because your children will have difficulties with their life. They will lose jobs. They may struggle with divorce. They will have health issues. And who better to learn from than their parent? The most powerful thing in the world is a story told to you by someone who loves you. If you hear a lecture or instructions about things you ought or ought not do, your mind will filter that, it will interpret that, it will argue with that. But if you are told a story by someone who loves you, they will take that story in and it will become part of their life. That's why Jesus sits down and tells stories to the people that he loves. When we get to the New Testament, Jesus, who is very familiar with the book of Deuteronomy, knows better than anyone else that God has spoken and the need to remember, gathers his disciples together and tells them, you were there when I turned the water into wine. You were there when I gave sight to the blind. You were there when I healed the leopard. You were there when I fed the 5,000. You were there. You were there. You heard it. You saw it. You witnessed it. And now I'm about to die. But let not your heart suffer perplexia. You think it's one more dead end. But I'm here to tell you, in 3 days, I will be resurrected. The Lord always finds a way out of our no ways. And then he says, remember. He takes the cup and he says, do this in remembrance of me. And there's always the future tied to the past. And he says, I will not drink of this cup again until I drink it with you. Remember. That's the positive of don't forget. Remember. And our pastor will now lead us in our communion service.